Welcome to the Track to AI podcast, your guide for AI and tech solutions, powered by Shay2. I'm your host, Amber Amortigi, and I speak with experts about how AI can be a tool for companies, not a replacement for employees. From AI integration to practical use cases, you'll get the clarity you need to make smarter decisions for your company. If you're ready to learn about AI solutions that actually work, well, you've come to the right place. It's time to get on track. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Amber Amortigi. So we all know that AI is great. We praise it on this show. We're constantly trying to help company leaders adopt AI across their organizations. It's a revolutionary technology. We all want it. It's supposed to make our lives so much easier. But of course, with all good things, people like to use them for bad things. I'm talking deepfakes, voice cloning, hackers that use AI to hack company data, and who knows what else. Our guest knows what else. Today, we're discussing how humans are the deciding factor in your company's security. It's not the hackers. And most companies, they still use security theater, which we're going to get into today, instead of driving genuine behavioral change among their employees. That's why now more than ever, during this era of AI deception, it's really important for company leaders to cultivate this security culture that actually protects its people, data, and your organization's overall operations. And let me tell you guys, there is absolutely no one better to walk us through all these things and more than today's guest, who you'll hear from in just a second. But first, please go ahead and follow the show on any platform that you prefer to listen or watch this podcast. We're talking Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, all the things. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. And also, dear listener and or viewer, we have a free gift for you. Just go to www.tracktoaipodcast.com to download your free Gartner report. It includes the 5 best practices for CIOs who are leading AI implementation across their organizations. And if you're not a CIO, it's still a great resource and it's still free. Again, that's www.tracktoaipodcast.com, where you can download your free Gartner report. Okay, it's time. Let's get into it. My guest today is Robert Siciliano. He's a security analyst, best-selling author, and the architect behind the strategic human firewall, which we'll discuss today. Robert has served on the board of the Identity Theft Resource Center, and he's a core contributor to the Realtor Safety Initiative. As one of the world's most recognizable educators in personal and corporate protection, you might have seen him on, CNN, Fox News, CNBC, Anderson Cooper, 360. If any of these ring a bell, let me know. Or maybe you've read about some of his work in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Forbes. Guys, when I said earlier that there's no one better to talk about this with, I meant it. Robert, welcome to the Track to AI podcast.
Thank you, Amber. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now, before we dive into all things AI, cybersecurity, corporate protection, I hear that you are preparing for your 14th Boston Marathon, which, if this episode comes out when I think it's going to come out, the Boston Marathon has already happened. First of all, I mean, one marathon is impressive enough, but 13 going on 14 marathons, I would love to know, how did you get into running? And I also know that you run for a specific cancer research institute, and I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I started back in 2012. I was probably I'm kind of like, my wife calls me, extreme. I was probably 20 pounds heavier than I am today. And I figured, oh, I've got to lose this weight. I can't do it anymore. I might as well just run a marathon. So
Might as
I
well.
signed up for my first Boston. I mean, isn't that what everybody does?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I trained, and that included lots of cortisone shots, because when you're 20 pounds overweight, training for your first marathon in your early 40s, your body's just not prepared for it, and your mind just goes faster than your body can handle. And that also comes with being diagnosed ADHD. And I finished, and then I was hooked. I mean, the running community is one of the most conscious communities out there. Like, runners really do care about so much. And at the same time, I was raising money, and I raised, back then maybe like 5-6 grand for the charity at the time. And since then, I've run, so many others. I was actually at Boylston Street when that second bomb had gone off back in 2013. Yeah, that was, my wife and kids were at the finish line, and I was between them and two bombs had just gone off, and that was the whole
Oh my
thing.
gosh.
Like, I can't really stop, and we raise like about 15 grand a year at this point for Dana-Farber Cancer Research. And my training consists of doing anything and everything I can so that I don't hurt myself between like December and April, so I can get to the starting line, so I can get to the finish line. And that's, I consider myself a minimalist trainer. So I do lots of treadmill and lots of bike, and as little road as possible, because, actually, when you run 12 marathons, you get to have ankle surgery. So I'm like 2 marathons post ankle surgery. Yeah. Yeah.
That's incredible, truly. Is the Boston Marathon is that something that you have to pre-qualify for, or is that something that anyone can sign up for?
So it's something that you have to pre-qualify for, or you become a charity runner like me, and you essentially pay your way to get in, which basically means you got to raise like 15 grand. So I've been raising money all these years so I can run, but at the same time, to support charities that, I feel passionate about. And this year, again, Dana-Farber Cancer Research. I used to run for Boston Children's Hospital. I ran for MR8. And, like, my girls have been attending my marathons since my wife was pushing them in a double stroller when they were like 3 and 5 years old. So my wife and kids have been along the whole time. And my 20-year-old, who she ran her first when she was 18, and she's fond of saying that Patriots Day, which is the day the marathon is actually in Boston, is her favorite holiday.
Wow. That's awesome. I'm really glad I asked that question, Robert. I didn't know that was going to be your answer. That's really cool. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
sharing.
Yeah.
All right, Robert. A term that you use often is the human blind spot. Would you mind telling our audience, what does that mean, and why should CIOs and company leaders, why should they care about the human blind spot when it comes to their security measures?
The human blind spot is why employees, consumers, citizens, it's why we resist security. Okay. The human blind spot essentially is the psychological instinct to trust. It's that cognitive gap where biological trust overrides digital suspicion or suspicion in general, leaving the door wide open for all kinds of fraud, AI enhanced deception, you name it, right? Think of it as like the biological default to trust and the psychological shortcuts, or those heuristics that criminals use to bypass human logic. Again, like biological impulse versus intellectual understanding, right? It's the internal conflict between our evolved survival instincts and our modern knowledge or lack of knowledge of various digital risks. Think of it as we as human beings are an interdependent species, which means we depend on each other for our survival. Man needs woman, woman needs man to procreate, to basically have the next generation. And that means that we by default need to trust each other, and we give the benefit of the doubt every day, online, virtually, in person, every phone call, email, text message. We want to, need to trust. And that creates the human blind spot. And because inherently we want to believe that everybody is good, that nobody has any bad intentions, that people aren't trying to hurt me. And so we resist security as a result.
Yeah, almost kind of denying that it's even something that we should consider, something that we should need. Because, like you said, we have this innate trust that humans are going to do good. And kind of piggybacking off of that, I do want to talk about security theater, which is something I mentioned at the top of the show. And for those who aren't familiar with the term, it's basically the practice of implementing highly visible, often very expensive security measures that kind of create this illusion, dare I say, of safety. It's not unique to the world of cybersecurity. We see this in, airports, for example. But the security measures, in reality, they're not really doing a whole lot. And for companies, what they like to do most of the time is they have these like compliance training and phishing simulations, uh, basically asking the employee to check off a box that they were able to go through the training and they understand, what's a phishing email, what's not. Why does this approach often backfire? And what should security awareness be instead?
Security has been around for thousands of years. Cybersecurity has been around for 20, 30 years, what, late 90s, Uh, it's a relatively new thing in our lives. Phishing simulation training has been around for what, 15, maybe 20 years, if that. And it's become the de facto compliance training. It just kind of took hold. No one ever questioned it because it provided metrics, and government basically signed off and said, okay, yep, you are compliant. You are, within regulatory standards. And that's what we've been running with since. And that has caused a significant degree of security fatigue. And I think that security fatigue is caused by the compliance trap. It's bombarding employees with complex, impersonal rules that trigger security aversion. So the compliance track is like that false sense of security felt by meeting regulatory requirements, while actual human behavior remains unchanged and vulnerable. Okay. Phishing simulation training is necessary, don't get me wrong, and it's designed to fix the problem of phishing. And that's pretty much it, right? And that's not the only risk that we face. But what it fails to do is address the human where they're at. And it fundamentally doesn't make the employee care about security. And that's a problem. What sometimes happens as a result is we engage in blaming the victim, and in some cases, even shaming the victim. And that leads to what I call the silent failure. It's a compromise of the human's, wetware, their brain, versus software that triggers no technical alarms and often goes unreported due to the shame barrier. The shame barrier is the emotional wall that prevents victims from reporting a breach. And we break this by treating mistakes as data, not causes for termination, right? If we continue to put the cart before the horse, which is what we're doing, phishing simulation training is the cart. The horse is actually like guiding and working with the employee to show them the way of this is what security is, this is what security isn't, kind of challenging their belief systems and kind of getting them involved in the process of security. And until we actually put the horse first, we're going to continually come up against the walls of the compliance traps.
I really like that you're speaking on like the psychological and even like emotional aspects when it comes to how employees think about their company's security. And you use this word and it was care. We want them to care about security. Um, Using your analogy, putting the horse before the cart, what can leaders do to kind of shift the mindset of the employees to start caring a little bit more about cybersecurity initiatives before it's too late and something happens and they're kind of forced to care at that point when they see like, oh no, this is a real thing. These threats are not mythical.
Mythical is how most people look at security. They don't truly want to think or believe that these things can happen to them to begin with. They resist security because by default they trust uh, predators, being sociopaths and psychopaths, hardcore narcissists that have no empathy, sympathy, guilt, or remorse. These are the people that do harm. We don't want to think or believe that that harm could be done to us. And so we kind of function in a state of denial. You kind of mentioned that already. And so when we function in denial, denial actually is a wonderful human trait that allows us to function in a world that's on fire and not have to think about or worry about fear and anxiety and threats because we truly want to think or make ourselves believe it can't happen to me. And so as a result, we do nothing about security. All right. We literally don't lock our doors. We don't install home security systems. We don't protect our own identities. We don't change up our passcodes. We don't use two-factor authentication. We just deny the existence. And we deny because it allows us to not have to think or worry about these things. Right. So when I get in front of a live audience, I engage in a dialogue, whereas most security awareness training is a monologue. It's being talked at or talked to, being told what to do. Whereas a dialogue is having a conversation. Hey, let's have a discussion. And people like that when it comes to security because they've had questions their entire lives regarding these issues. And what I do is I break down all the various cultural myths and misnomers and misunderstandings of what security is and isn't. And so like I asked them basic questions like, okay, so how many of you actually have a home security system? If I get 15% of the room to raise their hand, that's a lot, right? So 85% don't have a home security system. And I say, okay, so why don't you have that home security system? And the most common answer that I get is, well, we don't have a home security system because I don't want to live like that. And I say, well, what does that actually mean? They go, well, I don't want to have to worry. I don't want to live in fear, is what they say, right? And I'm like, well, truly, what does that actually mean? And then I go, okay, so I'm a guy that has 20 plus security cameras, which is actually true. And so if I've got 20 security cameras, what might you think about me, my disposition, my mindset? Like I wake up every day, I've got 20 security cameras. You think, okay, this guy must be what? And that was actually a question. Like, I must be what if with 20 security cameras? What do you think the audience answers as?
Paranoid.
Paranoid. That's their response. Like 100 people go paranoid, which is kind of funny, actually, right? And I go, yeah, well, do you know what paranoia actually is? It is the unjustified belief that you are being persecuted, that people are trying to harm or hurt you, that others are out to get you. And people look at security as a form of paranoia. That dichotomy essentially prevents us from recognizing risk or doing something about it because we don't want to engage in security practices if we have to worry, is what people think. They completely misunderstand that security is about gaining control. It's a process of managing risk. It's putting on a seatbelt to give you control over that vehicle. It's not about worrying or fear or threats that we have to be concerned about that keep us up at night. It's not about being paranoid. But culturally, that is our current belief systems. And so when we engage in phishing simulation training, which is essentially, using a hammer, do this, don't do that, or else, the employee's like, this isn't even my job. Like, I got stuff to do. Like, why would I have to do this once a year? Check the box, move on. And so over the past 30 plus years, I've come up with a strategy, a methodology. And I come from the world of personal protection, which is violence prevention. And I was hacked in the mid 90s. And that kind of woke me up to, data security. All security, from my perspective, is personal. And what that truly means is that physical violence is personal protection, personal security. But what's more personal than your identity? And so when you come from the perspective and look at all security as personal, it's the core belief that people protect what they love. They love their money, they love their identity, they love their kids, right? They protect their child's digital footprint, their bank account, right? By teaching someone to secure their digital life, you make more secure employees at work. And that's how it should be, but it isn't. We're saying do this, don't do that. And we're not even having a dialogue with our employees about this issue of where they're at in their lives and their worries and their concerns and their fears, and their mom or their dad that can't stop clicking links or responding to pop-ups thinking it's Apple and it's not, you know? So I've created a methodology that I call the strategic human firewall. And it's designed to block deception. It's a proactive governance, a mindset that turns employees from passive targets into active detection layers. It's the shift from, I fundamentally trust what I see, I give the benefit of the doubt, people aren't going to hurt me, I don't believe in security anyways, to, I verify everything. And that process is what I call security appreciation. So right now, all security is security awareness. Security appreciation, on the other hand, is the shift from awareness, which essentially is knowing, it's in your head, to appreciation, which is caring, which is in your heart. When employees appreciate how security protects their own lives, behavior changes permanently. The security appreciation gap is that chasm between an employee's intellectual understanding of risk, which is awareness, and the emotional commitment to act on that knowledge, which again is appreciation. And ultimately, the goal is to achieve what I call the kitchen table effect, which is the multiplier effect, where every successful training ends with the employee going home and teaching the concepts to their family, cementing those lessons for life. That's not happening with phishing simulation training. It happens with security appreciation training.
So much there to unpack. One thing I do want to note though is this, going back to the idea of like, well, it can't happen to me. Or, we hear stories of people opening those pop-ups and thinking that they're legit. And then one can be like, oh, of course, like that's silly. Why would you ever click on something like that? Or you get like these like crazy text messages from like your state's vehicle driver DMV, but it's not really the DMV. I've gotten a lot of those. I live in the state of Florida.
Happens in Boston too.
Yeah, exactly. This is like a national, global issue. I think though, to have that mindset of like, oh, like those things, like people don't actually believe in those. Well, it must be working. People must be getting tricked, hoodwinked, scammed, maybe thousands of dollars, staying on the phone for too long with a scammer who's trying to tell them to move money from their bank account into another one. And these things happen. These things are real. They happen to real people and they're being done by real people. I really like that you're, again, talking about like the psychological impact, the psychological shifts that an employee should be trying to make. So yeah, thanks for explaining all that, for spelling that out, especially when it comes to security appreciation. I would like to talk more about that in our next half of the episode. But first, we are going to take a quick break. Coming up, more security appreciation, AI deepfakes, and voice cloning. Of course, you can't miss the bad joke of the week, guys. So please stay tuned.
She2's Track to AI framework helps businesses adopt AI easily. In just 8 steps, you can unify data silos, maximize your ROI, and increase employee buy-in. Our experts will create a custom plan designed for your AI. Click the link in the show notes to learn more.
The ad is over. Welcome back, everyone. It's time for the bad joke of the week. Here it is. Why are emails so lonely? Because they're afraid of attachments. Yikes. All right.
That was actually pretty good.
It's all right. Thank you, Robert. You're very kind. Okay, let's turn our attention a little bit to some of the more prominent AI use cases for scamming and hacking. That's deepfakes and voice cloning. I want to know, what are the top 3 real world scenarios enterprises should be training for right now that most companies still aren't preparing their people for?
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit beyond 3. When I get in front of a live audience, one of the first questions I ask them is, besides the home security thing, is like, how many of you are actually using a different passcode across all your critical accounts? Such a simple question. If I get 15% of the room to raise their hand, that's a lot, which means 85% of the room is using the same passcode across multiple accounts. Next question, how many of you are using two-factor authentication across all your critical accounts, including email on your personal account? If I get 20% of the room to raise their hand, that's a lot, which means 80 to 90% of consumers, including employees, are using the same passcodes across multiple accounts and not using two-factor authentication. Less than 10% are using a password manager. Still, in 2026, this is a massive problem. And I explained to them that there are as many as 15 billion passwords on the dark web. And then I show them tools where passwords have been exposed and how hundreds of millions of people are using password as a password and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as a password. And they're like, oh, so how do we manage passwords? And show them password managers and how they work. Like, that's such a basic 101 thing, but that's really truly where most employees still are, as basic as that sounds. And while, password managers and changing up passcodes at work may or may not be a thing, like, because it's all, required and it's, scheduled and everything else. But at home in their personal life, that's where it begins. Okay. So starting there, right. And then recognizing that AI has stripped away all the clumsy red flags of traditional fraud. In the past, criminals relied on what we would call blunder force phishing, mass blasting emails riddled with scammer grammar. Today, generative AI allows for high precision impersonation, right, at scale. Criminals use neural puppetry to create the perfect lie now. And by scraping just seconds of audio from social media, they use voice cloning to impersonate a trusted source like a spouse, a CEO, an attorney, with at this point, I would argue 100% accuracy. And this, of course, weaponizes our biological default to trust, that human blind spot, making deception feel 100% human. Furthermore, AI automates the grooming process, which is really scary, using normalizing dialogue to build rapport and exploit what I call the loneliness loophole. It removes the manual labor of social engineering, allowing a single predator to pilot thousands of digital puppets simultaneously, bypassing technical firewalls by hacking the human wetware. And I don't know that we talk enough about the loneliness loophole. As much as 25% of all humans breathing right now on the planet wake up every day, and their default is they experience loneliness. Why does this matter? Because every time the phone rings, an email comes in, and they get a text message, this is an opportunity to connect with another human, to help them essentially rid their body of that pain and ache of loneliness, because that's what it is. Loneliness is no different than hunger pains or thirst, for that matter. Our body feels the pain and ache of loneliness specifically so that we would gravitate towards other humans to procreate. That's its point. That's why it's there. It comes and goes in certain times in our lives based on circumstance. Many of us get over it once we're married. Some people experience it during marriage if the marriage isn't solid. That said, if 25% of your workforce is seeking comfort in others, even a bad actor, that grooming process via text, phone, and email is where AI comes in, and it allows that, neural puppetry. And I don't know that anybody is talking about that. And it's a huge, massive vulnerability amongst your workforce. It isn't about recognizing a phishing email or recognizing a deep fake or recognizing a scammy email. It's about what all of these technologies and its motivation does to us emotionally, intellectually, right? How it affects our physical being, how it affects our outlook, what it's actually making us do biologically, how it's making our trust for our groomer come into play. No one's talking about that. And that is what is necessary to essentially get the employee on the edge of their seat, wanting to understand how they can manage this in their own personal lives.
You're really like expanding my mind right now. These issues, they go so much deeper than I ever considered, that I'm sure anyone listening has ever considered. Like you said, people don't talk about cybersecurity in this way. Yeah, that's pretty wild to think about, especially the loneliness angle of it. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, if these hackers, these scammers using AI and whatnot, if they can really trigger a person so much to act the way that they want them to act, I mean, that's so much power, so much vulnerability. And yeah, thank you for mentioning all of that.
And you mentioned vulnerability. When you talk about loneliness, like you're actually talking to people who feel vulnerable. They're at a point in their life where they feel vulnerable. They wake up every day feeling the anxiety and the pain of ache of loneliness, and their physical being feels vulnerable. And it's important to address that person where they're at in their lives so they recognize the risk that they pose, not to the corporation, but to themselves, and how in that vulnerable state, how it can lead to, bad decision making, right? Whether that's, getting into a relationship that's volatile, or even, engaging in a online affair via a online dating site with somebody who truly has no motivation to engage you emotionally in a good way. They're just trying to empty your bank account. And when they understand how these scams work, and many of them might actually be engaged in them at that time, they're like, whoa, like I'm actually like doing this as we speak. Like, whoa, I just wired $5,000 to who I thought was my boyfriend in, the UK. And like, because his brother got in a car accident, didn't have insurance, and needed to, pay the hospital bill. And my boyfriend told me he was going to pay me right back. And it's like, whoa, like this is happening as we speak, like in real time. These scams work because A, the way we're wired, B, nobody is effectively talking about them. And that's where true security appreciation training comes into play.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm willing to bet the people who are talking about cybersecurity in this way, it's the ones who are scamming and hacking. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly the right chords that they need to hit, to make a person act the way they want them to. So it's powerful stuff, Robert. And before we close, I have one final question for you. Speaking to all the company leaders listening out there, what's one change that they can make this week or immediately following this episode that will instantly reduce human risk in their organization?
I think that once the tech exec makes the issue more human to themselves first, recognizing their own personal lives, their mom, they can't stop clicking links, their dad, that every single time he gets a pop-up from, Microsoft or Apple, thinks it's actually real and calls you and said, hey, I got this pop-up from Apple and I called the phone number, and you're like, Dad, why'd you call the phone number? Like, make it personal to you first, and then realize right there and then your employees are dealing with the exact same issues, right? They have potentially the widowed sister or brother. They have kids who are engaged way too much in online activities that are getting themselves in trouble or emotionally vulnerable. That we all have a loved one who's at risk in that regard. And as we talk to those who are responsible for our budget for this type of training, right? Recognize that that person also has those exact same issues. And as you talk about yourself and humanize yourself and the issues that you face with your own family, you could even ask, do you have any of that going on in your own life? Well, all of our employees have that same stuff too. So we kind of need to shift things up a little bit. And as you humanize this issue, which we don't do that at all, it's just regulatory and compliance, That's all it is. It's a numbers thing to most CISOs and such, because that's what we've been trained to do. That's what we're given budgets for. But this is like in addition to. And once they see that, they're like, oh, if we're really going to move the needle, we've got to actually like humanize the issue. And I think once you do that, I think that the conversation is updated. And before you know it, like people are like literally wanting more of that. When I go into a room and I'm hired because they say, we just want our people to care, they literally like get me in the room, introduce me. I look out at the audience and I got 100 people looking at me with their arms crossed with a scowl on my face. Okay, security guy, what are you going to tell me that I already know? And as I am asking them questions and they begin to ask me questions and they realize, oh, this isn't about my company. This is about me. That those arms that were crossed begin to go down by their side and the scowl goes away and their eyes begin to open up a little bit wider. And as the arms go down, the hands begin to go up because now they have questions because they want to know, because they didn't realize this was going to be about them and they've always had questions. And so if you can facilitate that, your people are going to like want more security in their life. And that's the result of security appreciation.
Well, Robert, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Let us know, where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. If you can find me, you can find me on all the socials. If you can spell Siciliano or Siciliano, hook up with me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, my website is protectnowllc.com, protectnowllc.com.
Beautiful. Thanks again, Robert, for your time. Really appreciate you sharing your expertise with our audience today.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, and go ahead and share it with your network. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Track2AI Podcast, using the number 2, of course. And to sign up to our email list, you can visit www.track2aipodcast.com. Until next time, stay in the know and get on track.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by the guest are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of SHA2 Inc., its management, or employees. Listeners should not solely rely upon the information provided and should consult appropriate professionals for advice tailored to their individual specific needs. Neither the host, guest, nor SHA2 Inc. make any warranties, expressed or implied, regarding the information provided.